The morning my daughter flew to Chicago for a business meeting, I found her paralyzed son standing in the middle of my bakery at 4 in the morning. He held out a notebook filled with symbols I couldn't read and said, "Grandpa, Mom's been poisoning your bread for 5 months, and the doctor she hired is helping her. We need to call the police before she burns this place down with you inside." I stared at him. My 12-year-old grandson, the child I'd been told couldn't walk, couldn't speak, couldn't so much as lift his own head without support, was standing 3 feet in front of me on the flour-dusted tile of the bakery kitchen. His legs were steady, his back was straight. His voice was clear and strong, and shaking only slightly, the way any child's voice would shake when telling his grandfather that his mother was trying to kill him. Owen. My grandson Owen, who for 2 years had sat motionless in a wheelchair, his head tilted against a padded rest, his arms limp in his lap, his eyes the only part of him that ever seemed alive. That Owen was standing in my bakery, holding a cracked notebook full of secrets, and telling me everything I believed was a lie. I couldn't speak. The flour on my hands was still fresh from the dough I'd been kneading when he appeared. The ovens hummed their low, familiar song behind me. The pre-dawn darkness pressed against the windows, and my grandson stood there, whole and unbroken, waiting for me to understand. "Grandpa," he said again, "we don't have much time." I sank onto the nearest stool. My legs wouldn't hold me. Not because of the drugs my daughter had apparently been feeding me for 5 months, though those were part of it, but because in that single moment, the entire world I'd rebuilt over the past 10 months, the world where my daughter had come home, where she loved me, where she baked bread beside me, and called me Dad with tears in her eyes, that world shattered like the glass window Owen would break just hours later to save my life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me explain how we got here. How a 70-year-old baker and a 12-year-old boy ended up standing in a flour-dusted kitchen at 4 in the morning, one of them pretending to be dying and the other pretending to be broken, while the woman they both loved was planning to destroy them. Thank you for being here. Before we begin, have you ever trusted someone so completely that the betrayal felt like losing a piece of yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments below. This is a fictional story exploring the deep bonds of family and the devastating cost of greed. Any resemblance to real events is coincidental, but the emotional truths run deep. Let's go back 10 months. My name is Franklin Rhodes. I'm 70 years old, and I've been a baker since before I could see over the counter. My grandfather, Ellis Rhodes, opened the first Rhodes & Son Bakery in 1947 in a narrow brick building on Larimer Street in Denver's lower downtown. He'd come home from the war with shrapnel in his left knee and a sourdough starter he'd carried in his pack through France. That starter, kept alive across 3 generations, was still in my kitchen the morning Owen stood up. It was the heart of everything we made. My father, Robert Rhodes, took over in 1972 and expanded to 3 locations. He taught me to knead dough before he taught me to ride a bike. "Bread is patience, Franklin," he used to say, his hands working the dough in that slow, deliberate rhythm I can still hear when I close my eyes. You can't rush it. You can't force it. You give it time and warmth, and it becomes something extraordinary. I took over in 1989, and over the next 30 years, I grew Rhodes & Son into a chain of 18 bakeries across Colorado. Our flagship store, the original on Larimer Street, still used my grandfather's sourdough starter. The empire was worth $95 million on paper. But the real value was never in the money. It was in the flour-dusted mornings, the smell of bread rising before dawn, the knowledge that 3 generations of Rhodes men had stood in that same kitchen, shaping dough with the same hands, feeding the same city. My wife Eleanor was the best thing that ever happened to me outside of that bakery. We married in 1983, and she gave me one daughter, Meredith, born in 1990. Eleanor died of pancreatic cancer in 2016, and the day we buried her, something in me went quiet. The house on Washburn Street in Wash Park, the Tudor-style home where we'd raised Meredith, became a museum of memories. I stopped cooking. I stopped sitting in the living room. I lived in the bakery, arriving at 4 every morning and leaving well after dark, because the bakery still needed me even if no one else did. Because by then, I'd already lost Meredith too. Not to death, but to something almost as final. Silence. 10 years of it. She'd been 24 when things fell apart. Meredith had always been smart, ambitious, restless, in a way that reminded me of myself at her age. She'd studied business at the University of Colorado, graduated near the top of her class, and come to me with a proposal. She wanted to modernize the bakery chain, rebrand it, franchise it nationally, and she wanted to do it with her husband, Dominic Russo. I liked Dominic at first. He was charming, energetic, full of ideas. But I'd built my business by knowing when the numbers didn't add up, and Dominic Russo's numbers never added up. Late-night phone calls he'd step away to take, cash withdrawals he couldn't explain, a restlessness that had nothing to do with ambition and everything to do with something darker. Within a month of their proposal, I'd confirmed what I suspected. Dominic had a gambling problem. A serious one. He owed over $60,000 to people who didn't send polite collection notices. I told Meredith everything. I begged her to reconsider. "He'll drag this family's name through the mud," I said. "Everything your grandfather and great-grandfather built, I won't hand it to a man who'll gamble it away." The argument that followed was the worst of my life. She called me controlling, said I'd never trusted anyone outside this kitchen, said I cared more about bread than about her, and maybe she was right about some of it. I was controlling. I did struggle to trust. I had spent so much of my life inside that bakery that I sometimes forgot there was a world outside its flour-dusted walls. But I was right about Dominic Russo. At least, I thought I was. Meredith left Denver the next week, moved to Chicago with Dominic, and told me she didn't want to hear from me again. No calls, no visits, no holiday cards. She cut me out of her life the way you cut mold from a loaf, cleanly and without looking back. For 10 years I baked bread alone. 4 in the morning, every morning, standing in the same kitchen where my father and grandfather had stood. The sourdough starter bubbled in its ceramic crock. The ovens clicked and hummed, and I shaped loaf after loaf in the silence, wondering if the dough could feel how empty my hands had become. Then, on a Tuesday in March, my phone rang. It was 4:13 in the morning. I know because I checked the brass clock on the bakery wall, the one my father hung in 1975. The dough was resting under a damp cloth. The ovens were warming, and my phone was buzzing on the stainless steel counter. A Chicago area code I didn't recognize. I almost let it ring out. Nobody calls at 4 in the morning with good news. But something tightened in my chest, some instinct I couldn't name, and I wiped the flour from my hands and answered, "Dad." One word, one syllable, and 10 years of silence collapsed. I hadn't heard Meredith's voice since the day she walked out of this bakery, with Dominic Russo's arm around her shoulder and fury in her eyes. But I knew it instantly, even through the static. Even when the voice was barely a whisper choked with sobbing, a father knows. "Meredith, is that you?" "Daddy." She hadn't called me that since she was 9. "Daddy, I need help. Please. I know I said terrible things. I know I don't deserve to call you. But Owen. Dad. My boy. My little boy." She broke apart. The sobs came in waves, raw and ragged, the kind that empties you out completely. I stood with flour on my apron and tears burning my eyes and waited. "You were right," she whispered. "About Dominic. You were right about everything, and I didn't listen. And now, it's too late." She told me in fragments. Dominic's gambling had never stopped. It got worse. He burned through savings, maxed credit cards, borrowed from people who broke things when you couldn't pay. And when the money ran out, the anger started. First words, then walls, then her. I hid it for years, she said, her voice small and ashamed. Too proud to admit you'd been right. Too stubborn to come home and say I'm sorry. And Owen? I asked, terrified of the answer. The silence that followed was worse than anything she could have said. Worse than Eleanor's flat line. Worse than the door slamming 10 years ago. 2 years ago. Dominic came home drunk. There was a fight. He took Owen in the car, driving so fast, Dad. He crashed on the interstate. Owen was in the back seat without a seatbelt. My hand gripped the counter until the steel edge cut into my palm. The doctors said severe spinal and neurological damage. He can't walk. He can't talk. He can't feed himself or dress himself. He's 12 now, Dad. 12 years old, and he'll never run or say my name. I closed my eyes. Being right about Dominic Russo felt like swallowing broken glass, because the cost was my grandson's body and my daughter's spirit, and 10 years I could never get back. Where is Dominic now? Prison. Reckless endangerment and aggravated assault. 8 years. Her voice hardened, then crumbled. But that doesn't fix Owen. Nothing fixes Owen. Where are you? Still in Chicago. No money. Staying with a friend who's moving next month. Dad, I know I have no right to ask. I know what I said to you. But Owen needs real medical care. A stable home. A family. Come home, I said. The words came before I'd thought them through, but they felt like the most natural thing I'd said in a decade. Come home, Meredith. Both of you. I'll wire money for plane tickets tonight. I don't deserve this. You're my daughter. And Owen is my grandson. I've never met him, Meredith. 10 years, and I've never once held my grandson's hand. Whatever happened between us, none of that matters now. Come home. I'm sorry, she whispered. For everything. Me too. I hung up and stood in the bakery, listening to the ovens breathe. The sourdough starter bubbled in its ceramic crock, the same starter my grandfather carried through France, alive and patient and enduring, the way good things endure. Then I moved. First-class tickets from O'Hare to Denver International, departing the following evening. A hospital bed, wheelchair ramp, ceiling lift, grab bars, roll-in shower conversion. I called Henry Zhao, my operations manager of 22 years, and told him to clear my schedule. Everything all right, Mr. Rhodes? My daughter's coming home. After 10 years. She's bringing my grandson. Henry had been with me through everything. The expansion, Eleanor's death, Meredith's departure. He knew what those words meant. What do you need from me? Keep the bakeries running. I'll be busy for a while. I spent the rest of that day converting the first-floor study into a bedroom. Moved the desk and bookshelves, installed the hospital bed, tested the ceiling lift, arranged the wheelchair ramp at the side entrance. My back ached. My knees protested, but I couldn't stop. Every grab bar, every measurement, every careful adjustment felt like building something. The way shaping dough feels like building something. I was preparing a home for a grandson I'd never met. That night, I sat in Eleanor's rocking chair by the window and stared at the Rocky Mountains, their peaks white against a sky of stars. Tomorrow, Meredith and Owen would board a plane. The day after, they'd be here. Under this roof, my daughter and my grandson. Together with me for the first time, I sat in that chair until dawn, watching the mountains turn pink with sunrise, feeling something I hadn't felt since Eleanor's hand went still in mine. Hope, fragile and terrifying and impossible to resist. I didn't sleep. Not when everything I'd lost was finally coming home. I didn't know then that what was coming home wasn't my daughter at all. It was something wearing her face, speaking with her voice, carrying a plan so cruel that it would take a 12-year-old boy, silent and still in his wheelchair, to see through it. 2 days later, I stood at the front gate in the late March cold, gripping the iron bars with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The sky was overcast, that flat Colorado gray that sits heavy on the mountains and makes everything feel like it's waiting. A yellow cab turned into the circular driveway, and my heart climbed into my throat. Meredith stepped out first. She was thinner than I remembered, almost fragile. Her dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail that made her look younger and older at the same time. She wore a plain black coat that hung on her frame. When her eyes found mine across the driveway, I saw something I hadn't seen in 13 years. Not the anger, not the defiance. Something broken open. Vulnerability. Then she turned back to the cab, and I saw him. The driver was helping someone out of the other side. A boy in a wheelchair, small for 12. His body folded at angles that made my stomach drop. His head tilted against a padded rest on the left side. His neck apparently unable to support its own weight. His arms lay in his lap, thin and motionless, the skin so pale it looked almost translucent in the gray light. He wore a gray hoodie and jeans that hung loose on his frame, bought for a different child, a child who could run and climb and throw a ball. But it was his eyes that stopped me. Dark brown, almost black, clear and sharp, and utterly alive. They tracked my movement as I walked down the steps, followed me across the driveway with an intensity that seemed impossible for someone so still. Everything about Owen appeared frozen, trapped, unreachable. Everything except those eyes. They were watching me the way a person watches from behind a window, fully present, fully aware, separated by something invisible. "Dad." Meredith's voice cracked the silence. She was crying, hands pressed to her mouth. "I'm so sorry. For keeping him from you. For everything. I'm so sorry." I pulled my gaze from Owen and really looked at my daughter. A fading bruise yellowed along her left jawline. She held her right shoulder stiffly, as if something underneath still hurt. Dominic Russo had done this. To her. To Owen. To all of us. I opened my arms and she fell into them, sobbing against my chest the way she used to when she was 5 and the world was too big and too loud. I held her and breathed in the unfamiliar shampoo and the faint smell of airplane and exhaustion, and I whispered the only words that mattered. "You're home now. Both of you. You're safe." We stood like that until her breathing steadied. Then she pulled back, wiped her eyes, and turned to the wheelchair. "Let me introduce you," she said softly. She wheeled Owen closer, and I crouched down, my knees aching against the cold stone, so I was level with his face. Up close, I could see details I'd missed. A scatter of freckles across his nose. A thin scar along his right eyebrow. His hair, dark like Meredith's, fell across his forehead, in a way that made him look impossibly young. And those eyes fixed on mine, steady, searching. "Owen," Meredith said gently, "this is your grandfather. Grandpa Franklin." "Hi, Owen." My voice came out thick and uneven. "I've waited a long time to meet you." He couldn't respond. Couldn't nod or smile or reach for my hand. But his eyes held mine, with a focus that made the hair on my arms stand up. I had the strangest feeling that he wasn't just looking at me, he was measuring me. Deciding something, I reached out and took his hand. It was cold and still. No squeeze, no twitch, nothing. Just a small hand lying in mine, like a sleeping bird. "I'm going to take care of you," I told him. "Both of you. I promise." Those eyes never left mine. Not once. Inside, I showed them the rooms I'd prepared. For Meredith, the guest suite on the second floor with Eleanor's old watercolor of the Rocky Mountains still hanging above the bed. For Owen, the first floor bedroom. Hospital bed with adjustable controls. Ceiling lift. Bathroom with grab bars and roll-in shower. Everything I could think of to make his life easier. Meredith stood in the doorway of Owen's room and pressed her hand to her mouth again. "Dad, this is too much. It's not enough," I said. "But it's a start." That evening, we ate a quiet dinner. Meredith fed Owen carefully, one small spoonful at a time, wiping his chin gently when he couldn't swallow fast enough. She talked to him softly through the meal, telling him about the house, the garden, the mountains he could see from his window. He gave no visible response, but she spoke to him as though he could understand every word. After dinner, Meredith settled Owen into his bed. I stood in the hallway. The door cracked open, and listened. Her voice drifted out, soft and low, singing a lullaby I hadn't heard in 30 years. Hush, little baby. Don't say a word. The melody hit me like a fist. Eleanor used to sing that to Meredith. The same notes, the same gentle rhythm. And now Meredith was singing it to Owen. And the chain of it, mother to daughter to grandson, made something in my chest crack wide open. I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. This was what I'd been missing. Not the noise or the company, though I'd miss those too. This, the sound of someone you love taking care of someone they love. The sound of family continuing. Tomorrow we'd make appointments with specialists. Tomorrow we'd begin the long work of helping Owen, if help was even possible. But tonight, I let myself stand in that hallway and feel something I'd almost forgotten existed. Not happiness exactly. The sadness was still there. The guilt, the lost years. But warmth, connection. The sense that this house was no longer a museum of memories but a place where living things could grow. I went to bed that night certain that the worst was behind us. That whatever Meredith and I had broken between us could be mended with patience and time, the way bread rises if you give it warmth and weight. I believed my daughter had come home to heal. I had never been more wrong about anything in my life. The smell of blueberry muffins woke me at 6 the next morning. I lay in bed for a full minute, confused, because nobody had baked in this kitchen since Eleanor died. The scent drifted up through the floorboards, warm and sweet and so familiar it made my chest ache. Then I remembered. Meredith was home. I found her in the kitchen, hair pulled back in a flour-dusted ponytail, an apron tied over her pajamas. She stood at the counter with her sleeves rolled up, working a batch of muffin batter with the easy confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. The table was already set for 3. Orange juice in a glass pitcher. Coffee in the old ceramic pot Eleanor had bought in Santa Fe. "Good morning, Dad," she said, turning to smile at me. "I hope you're hungry. I made your favorite." The muffins were perfect. Golden on top, moist inside, the blueberries bursting sweet and tart. I hadn't tasted anything this good in years, and I told her so. Her face lit up in a way that took 10 years off her and 10 years off me. "Mom taught me," she said softly. "Remember? Saturday mornings. The 3 of us in this kitchen." I remembered. Eleanor at the counter, Meredith on a step stool beside her, both of them covered in flour and laughing. The memory was so vivid, I could almost hear Eleanor's voice. "More butter, Mary. Good bread starts with good butter." Over the next 3 weeks, Meredith became everything I'd once hoped she would be. She woke before me every morning, which was remarkable, considering I woke at 4. By the time I returned from the bakery at noon, the house was immaculate. Lunch was on the table, and Owen was freshly bathed and positioned in his wheelchair by the living room window where he could watch the birds in the garden. She baked constantly. Not just muffins. Banana bread on Tuesdays, cinnamon rolls on Thursdays, sourdough on weekends, using the starter I brought home from the bakery. She said it made the house feel alive again. And she was right. The smell of bread rising had always been the heartbeat of a Rhodes home. And Meredith had brought it back. "You have your mother's hands," I told her one morning, watching her shape a loaf with that same slow, deliberate rhythm my father had taught me. Eleanor would be proud. Meredith looked down at her flour-covered fingers and smiled. I wish she could see us. All 3 of us together. She hired a caregiver for Owen during the weekdays. Gloria Huerta was 55, with kind eyes and 20 years of home health experience. She'd worked with spinal injury patients before and came highly recommended by the medical supply company. Gloria arrived every morning at 8 and stayed until 4, helping with Owen's physical therapy exercises, bathing, feeding, and the countless tasks that came with caring for someone who couldn't move on their own. "Your daughter is remarkable," Gloria told me one afternoon. We were in the living room watching Meredith adjust Owen's neck support, her movements gentle and practiced. The patience she has with him, the tenderness. In 20 years of this work, I've rarely seen a parent so devoted. I nodded, feeling pride swell in my chest. Whatever mistakes Meredith had made, whatever years we'd lost, she was here now, present, trying, and that counted for something. Every evening after dinner, Meredith read to Owen. She'd sit beside his bed with a book propped on her knee and read aloud for an hour, sometimes more. Adventure stories mostly. Tales of children who sailed ships and climbed mountains and discovered hidden worlds. Her voice was steady and warm, and she read with expression, doing voices for different characters, the way Eleanor used to. I'd stand in the hallway and listen, just as I'd done that first night. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of Owen's face through the cracked door. His expression never changed. His body never moved. But those dark eyes were always fixed on his mother. Watching. Always watching. One evening, about 3 weeks in, I was sitting with Owen while Meredith cooked dinner. She'd left his wheelchair by the window as usual, angled so he could see the Rocky Mountains turning purple in the sunset. I pulled a chair beside him and sat down. "Your mom's a good cook," I said, making conversation I knew would get no response. "Gets it from your grandmother. Eleanor could make a 5-course meal from whatever was in the fridge. I never could figure out how she did it." Owen didn't respond. Of course he didn't. But I noticed his eyes shift, not toward me, toward the kitchen doorway. I followed his gaze and caught a glimpse of Meredith in the hall, phone pressed to her ear, her voice too low to hear. When she noticed me looking, she smiled brightly and waved before disappearing back into the kitchen. I looked at Owen again. His eyes were still fixed on the empty doorway. And there was something in his expression, something I couldn't quite name. Not sadness exactly, not anger, something closer to alertness. Like an animal that has heard a sound in the brush and gone perfectly still. I thought about it for a moment, then dismissed it. Owen's condition made it difficult to read his expressions. The doctors had said his cognitive function was uncertain. He might understand everything. He might understand nothing. There was no way to know. "She loves you," I told him quietly. "Your mom loves you very much." Those dark eyes moved to mine. Held there. Steady and unblinking and full of something I wouldn't understand for another 5 months. That night, lying in bed, I listened to the sounds of my house coming alive. Meredith's footsteps on the stairs. The creak of Owen's hospital bed adjusting. The distant hum of the dishwasher. And underneath it all, barely audible through the floor, the rhythm of Meredith kneading dough in the kitchen, preparing tomorrow's bread. My father's voice echoed in my memory. "Bread is patience, Franklin. You give it time and warmth, and it becomes something extraordinary." I closed my eyes, smiling. My daughter was baking bread for me. She was continuing the tradition. She was keeping the family alive. One morning, about a week later, Meredith sat across from me at breakfast and said the words that would begin my undoing. "Dad, let me help you with the business. You've been carrying this alone for too long." Her pitch was polished. She sat across from me in my study with a cup of coffee balanced on her knee and laid out her case the way she used to lay out business proposals at the University of Colorado. Clear, organized, confident. "You're running 18 bakeries by yourself, Dad. That's a lot for anyone, let alone someone who's been doing it for 40 years. I'm not asking to take over. I just want to help with the administrative side. Filing, contracts, vendor correspondence. Free you up to focus on what you love, which is the baking." She wasn't wrong. The paperwork had been crushing me for years. Henry Zhao handled the operations side brilliantly, but the financial records, the legal documents, the insurance policies and tax filings, those all lived in my study, In the filing cabinet I'd been tending since 1989. I'd been drowning in it long before Meredith came home. You used to study marketing, I said. You were good at it. I was. And I'm good with numbers. Let me take some of the weight off your shoulders. She leaned forward. You deserve to enjoy this time, Dad. With Owen. With me. Instead of spending every evening buried in spreadsheets. It made sense. More than that, it felt right. Like she was growing up, taking responsibility, trying to earn back what she'd thrown away 10 years ago. I opened the filing cabinet and took out the keys. The same keys I'd carried in my pocket since the day my father handed them to me. Everything's organized by property, I said, walking her through the system. Financial records here. Legal contracts here. Insurance here. Tax documents in the bottom drawer. Meredith listened carefully. Took notes. Asked smart questions about each property's management team, their revenue streams, their lease agreements. When I placed the keys in her palm, she closed her fingers around them and looked up at me with something that might have been gratitude or might have been triumph. At the time, I couldn't tell the difference. Thank you for trusting me, she said quietly. You're my daughter, I replied. Of course I trust you. 2 weeks later, Meredith brought up another concern. We were eating dinner, one of her roasted chicken meals that reminded me so much of Eleanor's cooking. I sometimes forgot which of them had made it. Dad, I've been thinking about your health coverage, she said casually, cutting Owen's chicken into small pieces. Dr. Nguyen is wonderful, but she's a general practitioner. At your age, you should really be seeing a geriatric specialist, someone who focuses specifically on aging and cognitive health. Patricia Nguyen's been my doctor for 18 years, I said. She knows my history. I know. And I'm not saying replace her entirely, but I found someone impressive. Dr. Nathan Cross. He has a practice in Cherry Creek, specializes in geriatric medicine. Published research on cognitive decline in elderly patients. Just one consultation. That's all I'm asking. I agreed. Mostly because she'd been so helpful with everything else that refusing felt ungrateful. The following Thursday, Meredith drove me to Dr. Cross's office on 2nd Avenue in Cherry Creek. The building was sleek, modern, the kind of medical practice that smelled like lavender and played soft piano in the waiting room. Dr. Cross was 43, tall, with dark hair graying at the temples and a handshake that inspired immediate confidence. His office walls were covered with diplomas and certifications. He spoke with the measured calm of someone who'd spent decades reassuring worried patients and their families. Your daughter tells me you've been feeling a bit run down, he said, reviewing a clipboard. Fatigue, some forgetfulness. Nothing unusual for a man your age, but worth monitoring. He conducted a thorough examination. Blood pressure, reflexes, a brief cognitive screening. Everything came back normal, which I expected. I felt fine, a little tired maybe, but I'd been tired since Eleanor died. You're in excellent shape for 70, Dr. Cross said. I'd like to start you on a supplement regimen. Vitamin D, B12, and a cognitive support formula I recommend to all my patients over 65. Think of it as preventive maintenance. He handed me 3 bottles of pills and a schedule. Morning vitamins with breakfast. Cognitive supplement with lunch. Vitamin D, before bed. Meredith collected the prescriptions with a grateful smile and shook his hand warmly. Thank you, Dr. Cross. It means a lot knowing Dad's in good hands. Something about the way she said it. Not the words themselves, but the ease, the familiarity. As if she'd known this man longer than one appointment, but the thought was there, and gone before I could examine it. Meredith was thorough. She researched everything. Of course, she'd spoken to him beforehand. The third piece fell into place so smoothly I barely noticed it happening. A Tuesday evening. About a month after Meredith came home, she brought a stack of papers to my study and set them on the desk with an apologetic smile. I know this is boring, but it's important. I've been reviewing your estate planning with a financial advisor, and your life insurance is seriously outdated. The coverage doesn't reflect the current value of the business. I looked at the papers. A new life insurance policy. $30 million. Meredith listed as sole beneficiary. This is standard for someone with your assets, she said. If anything happened to you, this would cover estate taxes, ensure the bakeries stay in the family, protect Owen's future. It sounded responsible. Prudent. The kind of thing Eleanor would have insisted on. I signed where Meredith pointed, initialed where she indicated, and handed the papers back without reading the fine print. All done, she said brightly. One less thing to worry about. That night I lay in bed listening to the sounds beneath me. The kitchen faucet running, cabinet doors opening and closing, and then the familiar rhythm. Hands working dough, slow and steady, preparing tomorrow's bread. The same rhythm my father had taught me. The same rhythm his father taught him. My daughter was baking for me. She was continuing the tradition. She was keeping the family alive. I closed my eyes and let the rhythm carry me towards sleep. Grateful beyond words. I didn't know that every loaf she'd baked since coming home had been laced with alprazolam, a benzodiazepine that would slowly dissolve my mind, my memory, and my ability to recognize what she was doing. I didn't know that Dr. Cross's supplements were designed to interact with the drug, accelerating my cognitive decline. I didn't know that the insurance policy I'd just signed was a $30 million bounty on my life. I didn't know any of that. I just heard my daughter baking bread, and I smiled, and I slept. 2 months after Meredith came home, I forgot how to make sourdough. I'm not talking about a minor lapse, mixing up the salt measurement or miscounting the rise time. I'm talking about standing at the stainless steel counter in the flagship bakery at 4:30 in the morning, staring at a bowl of flour and water and starter, and not knowing what came next. The recipe that lived in my hands. The recipe my grandfather had taught my father, and my father had taught me. The recipe I had made every single day for over 40 years was simply gone, like someone had reached into my skull and pulled out a page. I stood there for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the wall, my father's brass clock, counting the seconds while my mind groped through fog for something that should have been as natural as breathing. Eventually, my hands remembered what my brain could not, and they moved through the motions on muscle memory alone. But the 11 minutes terrified me. It wasn't the first sign. The fog had been creeping in for weeks. Small things at first, the kind you explain away at 70. Forgetting where I'd set my reading glasses, losing a word mid-sentence, walking into a room and standing there blank, trying to remember why I'd come. Normal aging, I told myself. Nothing to worry about. But then the dizziness started. Sudden, violent waves that turned the world sideways without warning. One morning I gripped the banister halfway down the stairs and watched the floor tilt and swim beneath me for a full 2 minutes. Another time I stood up from my desk, and the room spun so hard, I collapsed back into the chair. My heart hammering, my vision narrowing to a tunnel. The exhaustion was the worst part. Bone deep, relentless, as though my blood had been replaced with wet cement. Getting from bedroom to kitchen felt like wading through deep water. Some mornings I'd wake feeling drugged, my thoughts thick and sticky, my limbs so heavy that lifting my arm to silence the alarm clock required genuine effort. And my hands, the hands that had shaped bread for half a century, now trembled when I reached for a coffee cup. Not a slight unsteadiness, but a visible shake, the kind that made hot liquid slosh and spill, the kind that made my employees exchange worried glances when they thought I wasn't looking. Meredith noticed everything. Of course she did. She hovered with increasing concern, adjusting my schedule, insisting I rest more, making sure I took Dr. Cross's supplements on time. She brought me bread and herbal tea every morning before I left for the bakery, and every evening she'd check my pill organizer to make sure I hadn't missed a dose. "You need to take care of yourself, Dad," she said one morning after I'd nearly fallen stepping off the front porch. "Owen and I need you healthy." She drove me to Dr. Cross for a full workup. He ran blood panels, a cognitive screening, Checked my blood pressure and reflexes. Everything came back normal. Your daughter mentioned the dizziness and memory issues, Cross said, leaning back in his chair with that calm, reassuring demeanor. Bradley, at 70, these things happen. The body slows down. The mind gets a little foggy. My recommendation is to reduce your workload, get more rest, and continue the supplements. They should help over time. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was the only answer he had. Or so I thought. The fog continued to thicken. I had conversations with Meredith about the bakeries, making decisions about staffing and vendor contracts, and the next morning had no recollection of what we'd discussed. You told me to approve the renovation at the Boulder location, she'd say gently, showing me my own handwriting on a document. Don't you remember? I didn't remember. I didn't remember a lot of things anymore. Then one morning, something strange happened. I woke at 3:45 as usual, but Meredith hadn't come down yet. No bread on the counter, no tea in the pot. I was running late for the bakery, so I skipped breakfast entirely and drove to work on an empty stomach. By 10 o'clock, my head was clearer than it had been in weeks. The fog had thinned. Not completely, but enough to notice. My thoughts moved at something close to normal speed. The tremor in my hands had softened. I kneaded a batch of rye bread, and my fingers obeyed every command. By noon, when I returned home, the difference was so pronounced that I stood in the kitchen and stared at the loaf Meredith had left on the counter. Still warm. The crust, golden and perfect, and a thought surfaced that I immediately pushed away. The bread. No. That was ridiculous. Paranoid. Meredith had given up her life in Chicago to take care of me and Owen. She baked every morning because it was our family's tradition, because it made this house feel like home again, because she loved me. I picked up the bread, tore off a piece, and ate it. By 3 o'clock the fog was back. Thicker than before. I told myself it was coincidence. I told myself fatigue came and went, that one clear morning didn't mean anything. I told myself my daughter loved me. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to the house settle, and sometime after midnight, I heard a sound that made me open my eyes. Footsteps below. Soft, careful, deliberate. The kitchen light clicked on. A thin line of gold visible under my bedroom door. I checked the time. 3:11 in the morning. I got up slowly and opened my door. The hallway was dark, but the kitchen glowed at the far end. I moved quietly to the top of the stairs and listened. Meredith was in the kitchen. I could hear her moving, opening cabinets, the soft clink of glass on granite, then the sound of something being ground, a mortar and pestle maybe, followed by the familiar rhythm of hands working dough. She was making tomorrow's bread. At 3 in the morning, I almost went downstairs. Almost asked her why she was up so early, what she was grinding, what she was folding into the dough. But the fog was pulling at me, heavy and insistent, and my legs felt like they belonged to someone else. I went back to bed. In the morning, the bread was waiting on the counter. Golden. Warm. Perfect. I ate it without question. In the middle of July, 3 things happened in the space of 1 week that should have broken through the fog in my head. 3 alarm bells ringing loud enough to wake the dead, but the dead were sleeping soundly. And so was I. The first came on a Monday morning. I was in my study reviewing quarterly numbers that I'd already reviewed and forgotten twice when I heard voices at the front door. One was Meredith's, firm and apologetic. The other was Gloria Huerta's, confused and getting louder. I came into the hallway and found Gloria standing on the porch with her bag packed, her eyes red, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find words that wouldn't come. "I'm sorry, Gloria," Meredith was saying. One hand on the doorframe, her body positioned like a wall between Gloria and the inside of the house. "With Dad's medical bills and Owen's therapy costs, we need to consolidate expenses. I can handle Owen's care myself from here." Gloria looked past Meredith and found me. "Mr. Rhodes." I thought you were covering my salary. I didn't realize the finances were. It's been decided, Meredith said quickly. We'll call you if anything changes. Thank you for everything, Gloria. Truly. She closed the door. Gloria's shadow lingered on the porch glass for a moment, then disappeared. I stood in the entryway, trying to process. Consolidate expenses. I had an empire worth $95 million. Gloria's salary was less than what I spent on flour in a month, and Meredith had been grateful for Gloria's help, had praised her constantly, had told me just last week that Gloria was a blessing. Why? I asked. Dad, it's just not sustainable right now. Meredith's voice was gentle, reasonable. Between your supplements and Owen's equipment and everything else, I want to be smart about spending. Besides, I know Owen's routine better than anyone. It didn't add up. But the fog was thick that morning, and Meredith's logic sounded solid enough to slide past whatever alarm was trying to ring in my head. An hour later, my phone rang. Gloria, Mr. Rhodes. I'm sorry to bother you. Her voice was tight, strained. But I need to say something. In 15 years working with families, you develop instincts, and something about today felt wrong. Very wrong. Gloria, what are you saying? I don't know exactly. I truly don't. But something is not right in that house, Mr. Rhodes. I've been feeling it for weeks. The way your daughter watches everything, the way she controls who comes and goes, the way your health keeps getting worse while she keeps getting more involved in your affairs. She paused. Please, watch what you eat. Watch what you drink. And watch that sweet boy. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my study, turning her words over for a long time. Watch what you eat. What did that mean? Gloria was a caregiver, not a detective. She was upset about losing her job. People say strange things when they're hurt. I dismissed it. I shouldn't have. The second alarm came on Wednesday. I had a meeting at the flagship bakery about a renovation project and arrived early. Walking through the lobby of the attached cafe, I passed the window booths near the back and stopped dead. Meredith and Dr. Nathan Cross were sitting together at a corner table. Not across from each other. The way a patient's daughter sits with a physician for a consultation. Side by side. Close. Their heads were bent together over something on Cross's phone, and when Meredith laughed at whatever he showed her, she touched his arm. Not a polite, professional touch. A lingering one. Familiar. Intimate. I stepped behind a pillar before they could see me. Cross said something else, and Meredith's expression changed. The warmth dropped away, replaced by something I'd never seen on her face before. Something hard and focused and calculating. She glanced around the cafe, checking for observers, then pulled out her own phone and showed him something on the screen. They spoke for several more minutes in voices too low to carry. Then Meredith gathered her bag, touched Cross's hand one last time, and left through the back exit. I stood behind that pillar with my heart slamming against my ribs. She'd told me Dr. Cross was simply her choice for my health care. A specialist she'd researched online. There had been no indication they knew each other beyond the medical appointments. So why were they sitting together in a cafe like old lovers? Why the secrecy? Why the back exit? The third alarm came on Thursday evening. My phone rang while Meredith was giving Owen his bath. Henry Zhao. His voice careful and controlled in the way it got when something was seriously wrong. Mr. Rhodes, I need to ask you something. Did you authorize anyone to contact Pinnacle Food Group about acquiring the Rhodes & Son chain? The name Pinnacle hit me like cold water. They were the largest commercial bakery conglomerate in the western United States. They'd tried to buy me out twice in the past decade, and I'd refused both times. No, I said. Absolutely not. Why? Because someone using your name and your financial information reached out to their acquisitions department last week. They've already received revenue projections and property valuations for all 18 locations. Pinnacle's preliminary offer is $120 million. My hand tightened on the phone. $120 million. My entire life's work. 3 generations of bread and flour and 4 in the morning starts. Someone was trying to sell it out from under me. Who contacted them? I asked. I'm trying to find out. The correspondence came from an email address registered to your office. I thought maybe you'd changed your mind about selling. I haven't changed my mind about anything, Henry. Kill it. Whatever this is, shut it down. Already done, sir. I hung up and sat in the silence of my study. Gloria's warning echoed. Meredith and Cross in the cafe. And now, someone using my name, trying to sell everything I'd built. 3 alarms in 1 week. 3 pieces of a puzzle I couldn't see. Because the fog in my head turned every edge soft and every connection blurry. That night, Meredith brought me a warm slice of cinnamon bread before bed. She set it on my nightstand and kissed my forehead. Her lips cool against my skin. Sweet dreams, Dad, she whispered. I looked at the bread. I thought about Gloria's voice, urgent and afraid. I thought about Meredith's hand on Cross's arm. I thought about Henry's phone call and the $120 million offer for everything my grandfather had built. Then I picked up the bread, and I ate it. Every bite, because she was my daughter. And daughters don't poison their fathers, do they? Everything I'm about to tell you, I learned later. After the fire. After Owen stood up and opened his mouth and spoke words that shattered every lie his mother had built. He told me the full story that morning on the living room floor. His hands bandaged and his voice raw from smoke. And what he described was a kind of courage I didn't know a 12-year-old was capable of. This is what Owen saw. This is what Owen did. And this is why my grandson is the bravest person I have ever known. For 2 years, Owen had been performing. Every hour of every day, he sat in that wheelchair and pretended to be someone who couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but blink and breathe. His mother had told him it was necessary. We need Grandpa's help. Meredith had explained the night before they flew to Denver, but he won't help us unless he feels sorry for us. If he thinks you're hurt, really hurt, he'll let us stay. He'll take care of everything. I need you to do this for me, Owen. I need you to be still and be quiet and let me handle the rest. Owen was 10 when she asked him. 10 years old and already carrying a weight no child should know existed. He loved his mother. She was all he had. His father was in prison for something Owen couldn't quite remember, and the world outside their Chicago apartment was loud and frightening and full of people who didn't care. So he agreed. He folded himself into the wheelchair. He let his head tilt against the padded rest. He stopped talking, and he watched. For the first 3 months in Denver, Owen believed what his mother told him. They needed the money. Grandpa was rich, but stubborn. This was temporary. Once they were settled, once Meredith had access to enough resources, she'd tell Franklin the truth, and everything would be fine. Owen held on to that story the way a drowning boy holds on to driftwood, because letting go meant admitting his mother was something worse than desperate. Then came the iPad. It was a Tuesday evening in June. Meredith had been giving Owen his bath, and her iPad was on the kitchen counter, still unlocked. She'd left it there while she went upstairs to grab a towel. Owen was already out of the tub, dried and dressed. He could move perfectly fine when no one was watching. That was the hardest part, he told me later. Not the sitting still, the pretending, remembering to go limp when someone touched his hand, remembering not to flinch when a fly landed on his face, remembering to keep his eyes blank when every part of him wanted to scream. He walked to the kitchen counter and picked up the iPad. The messaging app was open. He read the most recent conversation in 30 seconds, and those 30 seconds ended his childhood. The messages were between Meredith and someone named Nathan. Owen didn't know yet that Nathan was Dr. Cross, but the words were clear enough. Dosage is on schedule. Cognitive decline accelerating. Another 2 months should be sufficient. And the supplements? Interacting perfectly with the alprazolam. His own doctor won't find anything, because she's not testing for benzodiazepines. Good. What about the exit strategy? Rachel says the Pinnacle deal is ready to execute once the policy pays out. 30 million plus 120 from the sale. We'll be clear of everything. Owen didn't understand all of it. He was 10, then 11, then 12. And words like benzodiazepine and cognitive decline meant nothing to him at first. But he understood dosage, and he understood decline, and he understood his mother was doing something to his grandfather's food that was making him sick on purpose. He put the iPad down exactly where he'd found it and went back to his wheelchair 30 seconds before Meredith returned with the towel. That night, Owen lay in his hospital bed in the dark and made a plan. He couldn't go to the police. He was 12, supposedly paralyzed, and his only evidence was a conversation he'd glimpsed on a screen. No one would believe him. He needed proof. Real, undeniable proof. He started with the notebook. A small composition book he'd found in the bottom drawer of his bedside table, left there from when the room had been Franklin's study. Owen couldn't risk writing in plain English. If Meredith found it, everything would be over. So he invented a code, a system of symbols that looked like idle doodling, the kind of meaningless scribbling a bored child might produce. Circles for people, lines for actions, dots for dates, squares for locations. To anyone else, the pages looked like abstract art. To Owen, they were a detailed record of everything he observed. Every time Meredith left her phone unattended, Owen read her messages. Every name, every date, every dollar figure went into the notebook in code. He learned who Rachel Voss was. He learned about the Pinnacle deal and the forged signature. He learned about the insurance policy and what $30 million meant. Then he found the recorder, an old cassette machine in the bottom drawer of his grandfather's desk, the kind Franklin had used decades ago to dictate letters. Owen tested it one night when the house was asleep. It worked. The batteries were half dead. But it worked. He began recording. Every time Meredith took a phone call after midnight, Owen pressed record from his bed. The walls were thin. Her voice carried. He captured 17 conversations over the next 3 months. Fragments of planning. Whispered logistics. The casual cruelty of two people discussing murder, the way other people discuss dinner reservations. The worst recording was from early August. Owen heard Meredith and Cross talking in the kitchen at 1 in the morning, their voices low but clear through the heating vent that connected his room to the floor above. The bakery, Meredith said. He goes there alone every morning at 4. No staff until 6. We adjust the safety controls on oven 3, the old one. Increase the gas flow. He'll be unconscious from the dosage by the time the fire starts. An old man falls asleep near a faulty oven. Tragic. But these things happen. And the insurance pays out within 90 days. Combined with the Pinnacle sale, we clear 150. More than enough. Owen lay in his bed listening to his mother plan his grandfather's death by fire. He was 12 years old. He was alone. He was afraid. But he pressed record. And he kept recording. Later, Owen told me that the hardest moment wasn't hearing the plan. It was what came after. Meredith walked into his room to check on him, the way she did every night. And she leaned down and kissed his forehead and whispered, "I love you, baby. Everything I'm doing is for us." Owen lay perfectly still, eyes closed, breathing steady, while his mother's lips pressed against his skin, and he thought, "No, Mom. What you're doing is for you." That was the night Owen decided. Not to wait. Not to hope his mother would change her mind, but to act. To save his grandfather. No matter the cost. Even if it meant losing her forever. On a Thursday evening in late August, Meredith announced she needed to fly to Chicago. We were at the dinner table, and she mentioned it the way someone mentions a dentist appointment. Casual. Routine. "My lawyer needs me to sign the final divorce papers in person," she said, spooning mashed potatoes onto Owen's plate. "Spencer and Reed on Michigan Avenue. I'll fly out tomorrow morning and be back Saturday night. I nodded. Divorces were complicated, especially ones involving a child and prison sentences. It made sense. Everything Meredith did always made sense. That was the terrifying part. Though I didn't know it yet. I'll bake something special before I go, she said, smiling at me across the table. Your favorite. The sourdough. She said it like a gift. Like a daughter doing something sweet for her father before a short trip. And maybe that's what it was. In some twisted corridor of her mind. A final offering. A last supper prepared with the same hands that had learned to knead dough in this very kitchen, beside her mother, on Saturday mornings that smelled like butter and flour and everything good in the world. That evening, I sat in the living room with Owen, while Meredith worked in the kitchen. I could hear her moving through the familiar rhythm. The cabinet doors. The ceramic crock opening. The soft thump of dough hitting the counter. The sourdough starter that my grandfather had carried through France was being fed and divided and worked into shape, the way it had been worked every week for nearly 80 years. Owen sat in his wheelchair by the window. The Rocky Mountains were fading into purple silhouettes against the last light. His eyes were not on the mountains. They were on the kitchen doorway, fixed and unblinking, tracking every sound his mother made. I noticed. But I didn't understand. I thought he was listening to the rhythm the way I listened to it. Comforted by it. Soothed by the sound of family continuing. I was wrong about what those eyes were tracking. I was wrong about everything. At 8 o'clock, Meredith brought the bread to the table. It was the most beautiful loaf she'd ever baked. Golden crust, perfectly scored. The kind of sourdough that crackles when you press it and fills the room with a scent so deep and yeasty it feels ancient. She set it on the cutting board with a cloth napkin underneath and sliced it with the serrated knife Eleanor had bought in '79. Made it with extra love tonight, she said, sliding a thick, warm slice onto my plate. 3 generations of starter in that dough, Dad. Grandpa Ellis would be proud. I picked it up. The crust was crisp and warm. The crumb was open and airy, exactly the way a proper sourdough should be. I bit into it and tasted my childhood. Sunday mornings with my father. The flagship bakery before dawn. My grandfather's hands, scarred and flour-dusted, pulling loaves from the old brick oven. This is perfect, I told her. Meredith, this is the best loaf you've ever made, she smiled. I wanted it to be special. It was special. It was laced with enough alprazolam to keep me foggy and disoriented for the next 12 hours. Enough to make sure that when I arrived at the bakery at 4 in the morning, my reflexes would be slow, my thinking would be clouded, and my ability to escape a burning building would be close to zero. I ate 3 slices. I didn't know. I couldn't have known. All I tasted was bread and memory and love. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. This wasn't unusual anymore. The insomnia had become part of my decline. Another symptom I'd learned to accept. I lay in bed until midnight, then gave up and went downstairs. The house was dark and quiet. Meredith's suitcase sat by the front door, packed and ready. Her flight was at 7 in the morning. The car service would arrive at 5. Something pulled me toward the bakery. Not the flagship downtown, but the small prep kitchen we'd built in the garage years ago for testing new recipes. I hadn't used it in months, but the keys were still on the hook by the back door. I drove to the flagship instead. 15 minutes through empty Denver streets, the Rockies invisible in the darkness, streetlights making orange pools on the asphalt. I parked in the alley behind the building and let myself in through the service entrance. The bakery smelled the way it always smelled at night. Yeast and flour, and the ghost warmth of ovens that had been cooling since closing. I walked through the front area, past the display cases and the register, into the kitchen, where 3 industrial ovens lined the back wall. Oven 1 and Oven 2 were modern, installed 5 years ago. Stainless steel and digital controls. Oven 3 was the original, a massive cast-iron beast that my grandfather had bought second-hand in 1947. It had been retrofitted over the decades with updated gas lines and safety controls, but its bones were old. Its soul was old. It was the oven that had baked the first Rhodes and Son loaf, and I'd kept it running out of sentiment. I don't know what made me check it. Maybe Gloria's warning still echoing somewhere beneath the fog. Maybe some instinct older than language, the kind that tells you to look behind the door, to check the lock twice, to listen for the sound that doesn't belong. I crouched in front of oven 3 and looked at the safety control panel. The gas shutoff valve, the temperature limiter, the flame sensor override. I'd had these controls inspected every year for the past 2 decades. I knew what they were supposed to look like. They didn't look right. The temperature limiter had been adjusted. The setting was higher than anything I'd ever authorized, high enough to cause the gas line to overheat. The flame sensor override had been switched from automatic to manual, meaning the oven could continue pumping gas, even if the flame went out. And the emergency shutoff, the failsafe that was supposed to cut the gas if temperatures exceeded safe levels, had been disabled entirely. Someone had turned oven 3 into a bomb. My hands were shaking as I stood up. The fog was thick, pulling at my thoughts like mud, and I couldn't connect the pieces. Who would do this? When? The controls had been fine at the last inspection in April. That was 4 months ago. 4 months during which only staff and family had access to the kitchen. Family. The thought surfaced and I shoved it down. No. Not possible. Meredith didn't even know how these ovens worked. She baked at home, not here. There had to be another explanation. A maintenance error. A staff mistake. Something. I drove home in a daze. The alprazolam from the sourdough was pulling me under, making my eyelids heavy and my thoughts slow. I barely made it up the stairs. At 5 in the morning, I heard Meredith moving through the house. Footsteps on the stairs. The front door opening. The crunch of tires on gravel as the car service arrived. Then her voice, soft, at my bedroom door. "Dad? I'm leaving now." I opened my eyes. She stood in the doorway, backlit by the hall light, her face in shadow. "Take care of yourself," she said. "I love you." She crossed the room, leaned down, and kissed my forehead. Her lips were cool. Her perfume smelled like vanilla and something chemical underneath. Something I'd never noticed before. "I love you too," I whispered. She left. The front door closed. The car pulled away, and the house went silent. Down the hall, in his first-floor bedroom, Owen was already awake. Already sitting up. Already counting the hours until 4 in the morning, when his grandfather would walk into the bakery alone, and his mother's trap would spring, and he would have to choose between the woman who gave him life and the man who gave him a home. 7 hours. Owen had 7 hours to save my life. He didn't waste a single one. The smoke detector in the hallway went off at exactly 4:11 in the morning. I know that because the brass clock in the bakery office, the same one my father hung in 1975, had just chimed 4 times when I heard it. The sound cut through whatever fog was left in my head like a blade through warm butter. I sat up in bed and smelled it immediately. Not the warm, yeasty smell of bread rising in an oven. This was chemical. Plastic. Paint. The kind of smell that tells your body to move before your mind catches up. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, and my feet hit the hardwood floor. The wood was warm. Not summer warmth, seeping through the foundation. This was the kind of warm that means something underneath you is burning. I grabbed the doorknob and pulled it back. Hot. Not scalding, but hot enough to make me understand the fire was close. The hallway was filling with gray smoke, rolling along the ceiling like storm clouds moving sideways. I dropped to my knees and crawled toward the staircase. The flagship bakery sat directly below the living quarters. My father built the apartment above the shop in 1968, so he could be the first one downstairs every morning. I had lived there for 42 years. But that night, the smoke turned my home into a place I did not recognize. Orange light flickered at the base of the stairwell. I could hear the wood shelving popping, glass jars exploding from the heat. 50 years of flour, dust, and cotton aprons. The whole place was fuel. Then I remembered Owen. His room was on the first floor. I tried to scream his name, but the smoke filled my throat and bent me in half. I grabbed the railing and went down. The heat pushed against my face like an open oven door. I made it to the bottom and turned left toward Owen's room. The door was closed. I pushed it open and the air inside was clearer. The window was cracked open about 2 inches. Someone had opened it from the inside. Owen's hospital bed was empty. The sheets were pulled back. The wheelchair was gone. The ceiling lift harness hung loose, swaying like a puppet with its strings cut. My grandson, the boy who could not walk or talk or feed himself, was gone. I heard a thud behind me. Then another, coming from the back door that led to the alley. I crawled toward it, staying low, breathing through the collar of my shirt. I reached the door, pushed it open, and the night air hit me like cold water. I fell forward onto the concrete and gasped until I thought my ribs would crack. Then I heard his voice. "Grandpa, over here." Owen was sitting in his wheelchair at the far end of the alley, near the dumpster where we threw out the day-old rolls every Tuesday. He was not slumped. He was not still. He was sitting upright, both hands gripping the wheels, looking at me with those dark brown eyes that had been watching everything for 5 months. "Owen," I said. My voice was raw. "How did you get out here?" He did not answer that question. He reached beneath the blanket on his lap and pulled out the notebook, the one with the cipher. Then, with his other hand, he held up a cell phone. The screen was bright in the dark alley. The timestamp said 3:47 in the morning, 24 minutes before the smoke detector went off. "Watch," Owen said. His voice was quiet and steady. A voice I had never heard before. A voice that belonged to a boy who had been pretending to be silent for 5 months. I pressed play with shaking hands. The screen showed the bakery kitchen filmed from a low angle. Meredith stood at the center island, wearing black clothes and black gloves. She was pouring lighter fluid onto the wooden prep table, the counter, the flour bags, the shelving. She soaked the aprons by the oven. She poured a trail from the kitchen through the front of the shop. Then she pulled a long match from the box we kept by the old gas range, struck it, held it for a moment, and dropped it. The lighter fluid caught instantly. A blue flame raced across the prep table and jumped to the shelves. Meredith turned and walked out the front door without looking back. She did not check Owen's room. She did not come to my bedroom. The video ended. "She set the fire, Grandpa," Owen said. "Dr. Cross gave her the idea last week. I recorded that conversation too. It is on the phone. All of it. Sirens. Coming down Colfax Avenue, getting louder. Red and blue lights bounced off the brick walls of the alley. I pulled Owen out of the wheelchair and held him against my chest. He was small and thin, and his arms wrapped around my neck. We were both shaking. "I am sorry I lied to you," he whispered into my shoulder. "I had to make her believe I could not see what she was doing. It was the only way to keep you safe." A fire truck pulled into the alley, followed by a police cruiser. A paramedic ran toward us. Behind him, at the far end of the block, I saw a figure standing half hidden behind a parked car. Meredith. She was watching the building burn. She had her phone to her ear. She had not expected anyone to come out of that building alive. Owen saw her too. "I have everything, Grandpa," he said. 5 months of recordings. The notebook explains all of it. Every drug she put in your bread. Every conversation with Dr. Cross. Every dollar she moved. Every lie. The paramedic wrapped a blanket around Owen. Another one pressed an oxygen mask over my face. The air tasted clean and metallic and impossibly good. I watched the bakery burn. The Rhodes and Son sign, hand-painted by my father in 1971, curled and blackened and fell from the brick facade. It hit the sidewalk and shattered into pieces. Owen squeezed my hand. "We will build a new one," he said, 12 years old. Thin as a whisper. Braver than anyone I have ever known. "Yes, we will," I said. By dawn, the flagship bakery was gone. But 2 days later, they found the brass clock from 1975 in the wreckage, dented and blackened, but still keeping time. Some things are built to survive fire. The paramedics took us to St. Luke's Medical Center on East 19th Avenue. They put me in a room on the 3rd floor with an oxygen line in my nose and an IV drip in my left arm. Owen was in the room next to mine. A nurse told me his vitals were strong, his lungs were clear, and that he had walked into the emergency room on his own 2 legs. She said it like she was reporting the weather. She had no idea what that sentence meant to me. Detective Ray Castillo arrived at 7:15 in the morning. He was a broad-shouldered man in his early 50s with a gray mustache and a calm voice that made you feel like he had seen everything at least twice. He pulled a chair next to my bed, set a small recorder on the side table, and asked me to tell him what happened. I told him about the fire, about Owen's empty bed, about the video. He listened without interrupting. "Mr. Rhodes," he said, "your grandson is next door asking to speak with both of us. He says he has been collecting evidence for 5 months." They wheeled my bed into Owen's room. The boy was sitting upright, legs crossed beneath the blanket. On the tray table in front of him sat 3 items: the cipher notebook, the cell phone, and a folded piece of paper I had never seen before. "Grandpa, I need to tell you everything," Owen said. "Some of it is going to hurt." He opened the notebook to the first page. The symbols were not random. Owen had created the cipher at age 10 in Chicago, because Dominic used to go through his things. Each symbol corresponded to a letter, but the key shifted every 7 entries, making it nearly impossible to decode without the master page, which Owen had memorized and destroyed. He translated the entries while Castillo recorded. March 29th. Meredith made a phone call at 11:40 at night, whispering the words insurance, policy, and 6 months. April 4th. A man named Nathan visited while Franklin was at the bakery. He brought a small brown bottle and left it behind the cereal boxes. Owen watched from his wheelchair through the reflection in the window. April 12th. Meredith began adding a white powder to the sourdough starter every morning between 4 and 4:30. Owen tracked the pattern. 14 days I ate the bread. 14 days I had symptoms. 3 days I skipped. 3 days I improved. The correlation was perfect. Castillo leaned forward. "Son, how did you get the video recordings?" Owen picked up the phone. "Meredith bought me this so I could play games. She thought it would keep me quiet. She never checked it, because she believed I could not use my hands well enough to operate it. But I could. The paralysis in my upper body recovered 2 months after the accident. I kept it hidden." He opened a folder containing 47 video files and over 60 audio recordings. He played 3. The first showed Meredith on the phone with Dr. Cross, discussing the timeline. She said the words, 6 months, natural causes, and the policy pays double for accidental death. The second showed Dr. Cross handing Meredith a new bottle, saying this one is stronger but it will not show up on a standard panel, which is why I keep ordering the basic tests. The third was the arson video from the night before. Castillo's knuckles had gone white around the arm of his chair. Then Owen unfolded the piece of paper. It was an email chain between Meredith and a woman named Rachel Voss, a paralegal at the firm that handled Dominic Russo's criminal case. "Grandpa," Owen said. His voice dropped. Dominic did not crash the car because he was drunk. The room went quiet. Mom put something in his drink that night. The same kind of drug she has been putting in your bread. Dominic was not an alcoholic. He barely drank at all. She drugged him, put me in the car, and told him to drive. I gripped the bed rail. The room tilted around me. She needed Dominic out of the way. He was asking questions about $40,000 she had moved to an offshore account. So, she created the accident. She got rid of Dominic. She got custody of me, and she got a reason to come back to you. Owen looked at Castillo. Dominic Russo is serving 8 years for something my mother caused. The email chain proves Rachel Voss helped falsify the blood alcohol report. Dominic's real blood work was clean. Voss buried it. Castillo stepped into the hallway. I heard him speaking rapidly. Warrant. Fraud. Tampering. Attempted murder. Owen reached across the gap between our beds and took my hand. I am sorry I did not tell you sooner, he said. I needed enough evidence so she could not talk her way out of it. I needed it to be so clear that no lawyer could make it disappear. I looked at this boy. 12 years old. 5 months pretending he could not move, could not speak, could not think, building a cipher at 10 to protect himself from one parent, then using it to protect his grandfather from the other. Watching his mother poison me day after day, with the discipline to keep recording, keep waiting, until the evidence was undeniable. You have nothing to apologize for, I said. Castillo returned. Mr. Rhodes, we are issuing arrest warrants for Meredith Rhodes, Dr. Nathan Cross, and Rachel Voss. I need your grandson's phone and notebook as evidence. A forensic team is heading to the bakery site, and I am calling the district attorney about reopening the Dominic Russo case. Owen placed the notebook, the phone, and the email on the tray table. 5 months of truth, stacked neatly on a hospital tray. Take all of it, Owen said. I do not need it anymore. Castillo picked up the items carefully. He looked at Owen for a long moment. Son, he said. In 26 years of police work, I have never seen anything like what you just did. Owen did not smile. He looked tired. The kind of tired that belongs to someone much older than 12. I just did not want him to die, he said quietly. He is the only good person I have left. Detective Castillo made 3 phone calls in the hallway before he came back into Owen's room. He closed the door behind him and sat down with the kind of stillness that told me the next few hours were going to change everything. Mr. Rhodes, he said, we have a problem. Meredith is not at any of her known locations. Her cell phone pinged near Union Station at 6:40 this morning, but it went dark after that. She either turned it off or destroyed it. Dr. Cross called in sick to his practice at 7. His receptionist said he sounded nervous. Rachel Voss has not shown up to her office in 2 days. Owen sat quietly on his hospital bed, his hands folded in his lap. He did not look surprised. She has a backup plan, Owen said. She always has a backup plan. When things went wrong with Dominic, she had the paralegal ready. When the poisoning was taking too long, she had the fire ready. If the fire did not work, she will run. Castillo looked at the boy the way you look at someone who just solved a math problem you have been staring at for an hour. Do you know where she would go? He asked. Owen thought for a moment. She has a storage unit on South Broadway, number 314. She kept a bag there with cash and documents. She told Dr. Cross about it on a phone call on July 9th. I have the recording. Castillo sent 2 officers to the storage unit within 15 minutes. Then he turned to me. Mr. Rhodes, I want to set something up. If Meredith thinks you are still in critical condition, still confused from the fire and the drugs, she may try to contact you. People like her do not just disappear. They come back to control the story. She will want to know what you told the police, what you remember, what you do not remember. I want you to take that call when it comes. I understood what he was asking. He wanted me to be the bait. Tell me what to say, I said. Castillo spent the next hour coaching me. Keep your voice weak. Sound confused. Tell her you do not remember much about the fire. Tell her the doctors think the smoke caused memory problems. Ask her where she is. Tell her you need her. Tell her Owen is still in his wheelchair. Still silent. Still the same. Do not mention the police. Do not mention the evidence. Let her believe she is still in control. Owen listened to every word. When Castillo finished, Owen added one more thing. Tell her the insurance company called. Tell her the policy is still active, but they need her signature within 72 hours, or it expires. She will not be able to resist that. Castillo stared at the boy for 3 full seconds. Then he picked up his phone and called someone at the station. I need a forensic tech to set up a call recording on a hospital room phone within the hour, he said, and get me a female officer who can impersonate an insurance representative. The call came at 2:17 in the afternoon. I was sitting up in bed with the oxygen line still in my nose. Castillo was in the corner of the room with headphones connected to the recording equipment. Owen was in his bed next door, listening through the wall on a second set of headphones a technician had rigged for him. 2 uniformed officers stood in the hallway outside my door. The phone rang and I picked it up. "Dad?" Meredith's voice was shaking. She sounded like she had been crying. "Dad, oh my God, are you okay? I saw the news about the fire. I have been trying to reach you all morning. Are you hurt?" I let my voice crack. I let it tremble. It was not hard. My throat was still raw from the smoke. "Meredith," I said, "where are you?" "I woke up in the hospital. They said there was a fire. I do not remember much. The doctors say the smoke might have affected my memory. I am so sorry, Dad. I was not home. I was staying with a friend in Boulder. I came back this morning, and the bakery was gone. I thought you were dead. She was good. I will give her that." The tears sounded real. The panic sounded genuine. If I had not seen the video of her pouring lighter fluid across the prep table 8 hours earlier, I might have believed every word. "Owen," I said. "Is Owen okay?" "He was in his room when the fire started." "I do not know, Dad. I have not been able to reach the hospital." "Is he there with you?" "He is in the next room. He is the same. He cannot talk. He cannot move. The nurses are taking care of him." I heard her exhale. A long, slow breath. Relief. Not the relief of a mother learning her son is alive. The relief of a woman learning her cover is still intact. "Dad, listen. I need to come see you. I need to be there." I looked at Castillo. He nodded slowly and held up a small card with a handwritten note. I read it. "Meredith, before you come, I need to tell you something. The insurance company called this morning. A woman from Pinnacle Mutual. She said the life insurance policy is still active, but they need a signature from the policy co-holder within 72 hours or the whole thing lapses. Something about the fire triggering a review clause. She said she could meet us at the hospital tomorrow morning." Silence on the other end. 3 seconds. 5 seconds. "What time?" Meredith asked. Her voice had changed. The tears were gone. The panic was gone. What replaced them was something flat and focused, like a machine switching modes. She said 9 in the morning. "Room 312. "I will be there," Meredith said. "Dad, do not talk to anyone else about the policy. Do not sign anything until I get there. Promise me." "I promise," I said. She hung up. Castillo removed his headphones and looked at me. "We got it," he said. She placed herself in Boulder at the time of the fire, which contradicts the video evidence of her inside the bakery at 3:47. She showed no concern about Owen, beyond confirming he is still disabled. And she responded to the insurance bait exactly the way your grandson predicted. He stood up and made another call. "Set up a plainclothes team at St. Luke's. 3rd floor, room 312. I want 4 officers inside the room disguised as hospital staff. 2 more at every exit. She is coming in at 9 tomorrow morning." Castillo paused at the door and looked back at me. "Mr. Rhodes, your grandson said she always has a backup plan. We need to make sure ours is better." I lay back against the pillow and closed my eyes. My chest ached from the smoke. My arm was sore from the IV. My mind was spinning with everything Owen had revealed. But underneath all of that, for the first time in months, the fog was gone. Completely gone. No dizziness. No confusion. No tremor in my hands. Because for the first time in 5 months, there was no poison in my bread. I did not sleep that night. I lay in the hospital bed, watching the ceiling tiles, and listening to the hum of machines down the hallway. Every time a nurse walked past my door, I tensed. Every time an elevator opened on the third floor, my heart jumped. Castillo had left two plainclothes officers outside my room, a man and a woman dressed in scrubs, but their presence did not calm me. Nothing would calm me until it was over. At 6:30 in the morning, Castillo arrived with 4 additional officers. They transformed room 312 into a stage. One officer dressed as a nurse adjusted the empty bed. Another sat behind a curtain with recording equipment. A female detective named Sergeant Dana Morales put on a blazer and pinned a fake Pinnacle Mutual identification badge to her lapel. She carried a manila folder filled with blank pages designed to look like insurance documents. Castillo came to my room at 7:45. "Mr. Rhodes, we are ready. I need you in room 312 by 8:30. You will be in the bed. Morales will be seated in the visitor chair pretending to review paperwork. When Meredith arrives, let her come to you. Let her talk. Do not confront her. Do not accuse her. Just let her walk into the room and sit down. We handle the rest." "Where is Owen?" I asked. "He is staying in his room. I have an officer with him. He does not need to see this." I disagreed. Owen had earned the right to see it. But I also understood that Castillo was protecting a 12-year-old boy from watching his own mother get arrested. So I said nothing. They wheeled me into room 312 at 8:20. The room smelled like antiseptic and floor wax. Morales sat in the visitor chair with the manila folder open on her lap, pen in hand, looking exactly like a board insurance representative waiting for a client. 2 officers stood behind the bathroom door. 2 more waited in the room across the hallway. Castillo positioned himself in the stairwell at the end of the corridor. 8:45. Nothing. 8:50. The elevator dinged. Footsteps. Then silence. 8:55. A second elevator ding. More footsteps, lighter this time. High heels on linoleum. The door to room 312 opened at 9:03. Meredith walked in wearing a navy blue dress and a cream-colored cardigan. Her hair was pulled back. Her makeup was fresh. She carried a leather handbag over her left shoulder, and she was smiling. The kind of smile you wear when you have practiced it in a mirror. The kind of smile that is designed to make people trust you. "Dad," she said. She crossed the room quickly and took my hand. Her fingers were cold. I came as fast as I could. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," I said. Confused. "The doctors say..." The smoke did something to my memory. "That is completely normal," she said. She squeezed my hand. "You are going to be fine. I am here now." She turned to Morales. "You must be from Pinnacle Mutual. I am Meredith Rhodes. I am the co-holder on the policy." Morales stood up and shook her hand. "Thank you for coming in, Miss Rhodes. I just have a few documents that need your signature." Standard procedure after a property incident involving a policyholder. Meredith sat down in the second visitor chair and opened her handbag. She pulled out a pen, her own pen, and leaned forward. She did not ask what the documents said. She did not read the first page. She simply asked, "Where do I sign?" That was the moment I understood something about my daughter that I had been refusing to understand for months. She was not desperate. She was not confused. She was not a woman driven to terrible things by terrible circumstances. She was calm. She was prepared. She was efficient. She had come to this hospital room the way a professional comes to a closing. Sign the papers. Collect the money. Move on. Morales glanced toward the bathroom door. "Actually, Miss Rhodes, before we proceed with the signatures, I need to verify a few details." She flipped open the manila folder. "Can you confirm your whereabouts on the night of August 14th? Meredith did not hesitate. "I was in Boulder, staying with a friend. I drove back to Denver the next morning when I saw the news." "And can you confirm your relationship with Dr. Nathan Cross?" The first crack. Meredith's smile flickered, just for a half second, like a light bulb with a loose connection. "He is my father's physician," she said. "I have met him a few times at appointments." "And Rachel Voss?" The smile disappeared completely. Meredith stood up. She looked at Morales. She looked at me. Then she looked at the bathroom door, which had opened 2 inches without a sound. "Dad," she said. Her voice was different now. Hard. Flat. The same voice I had heard on the phone when I mentioned the insurance policy. "What did you do?" "I did not do anything," I said. "Owen did." The bathroom door swung open. 2 officers stepped out. The hallway door opened behind Meredith, and 2 more entered. Castillo walked in last. He was holding a pair of handcuffs. "Meredith Rhodes," he said. "You are under arrest for attempted murder, arson, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit bodily harm. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Meredith did not scream. She did not cry. She did not run. She stood perfectly still in the center of the room, her leather handbag sliding off her shoulder and hitting the floor with a soft thud. She looked at me the way a chess player looks at a board when they realize they have been in checkmate for the last 5 moves and did not see it. "You let him trick you," she said to me. "A 12-year-old boy. You let a child destroy everything." "No," I said. "You destroyed everything." Owen just made sure someone knew. Castillo cuffed her hands behind her back. One of the officers picked up her handbag and opened it on the bed. Inside was her passport. A bundle of cash, approximately $8,000. A bus ticket to El Paso, departing at 1:15 that afternoon. She had never intended to stay. She came for the signature, and she was going to disappear. As they led her toward the door, Meredith turned her head and looked at me one last time. "I needed that money, Dad," she said. "You have no idea what my life has been like." I wanted to say something. I wanted to tell her that I would have given her anything, that all she had to do was ask, that I had waited 10 years for her to come home and I would have emptied every account, sold every bakery, given her every dollar I had if she had just been honest with me. But I did not say any of that, because I realized it would not have mattered. The money was never the point. The insurance policy was never the point. Meredith did not come home because she was desperate. She came home because she saw an opportunity. And the difference between those 2 things is the difference between a daughter and a stranger. Castillo led her into the hallway. The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside without looking back. I sat alone in room 312 for a long time. The fake insurance documents lay scattered on the visitor chair. Morales had left her badge on the side table. The room was quiet, except for the hum of the ventilation system. Then the door opened, and Owen walked in. He stood in the doorway, small and thin, wearing a hospital gown that was 2 sizes too big. He looked at me. "Is it over?" he asked. "It is over," I said. He crossed the room and climbed onto the bed next to me. He did not say anything else. He just leaned his head against my shoulder and breathed. The forensic report arrived on a Tuesday morning, 11 days after the fire. Detective Castillo brought it to the small apartment Henry Zhao had arranged for us on Welton Street, 3 blocks from where the bakery used to stand. It was a 2-bedroom unit on the 4th floor with a view of the mountains. Owen had taken the smaller room and filled it with library books he checked out every 3 days. I had the larger room but spent most of my time at the kitchen table, drinking coffee that I made myself. From beans I ground myself, in a pot that no one else touched. Castillo sat across from me and opened a thick manila envelope. He spread the documents across the table like a dealer laying out cards. "Mr. Rhodes," he said, "the lab results are back. I want to walk you through everything." The first document was the toxicology report from the bakery. Forensic chemists had collected samples from the wreckage, specifically from a sealed container of sourdough starter that survived the fire inside the walk-in refrigerator. The starter contained traces of alprazolam, a benzodiazepine commonly prescribed for anxiety disorders. The concentration was consistent with repeated, deliberate addition over a period of several months. The amount in each batch was low enough to avoid immediate detection but high enough to cause progressive cognitive decline, memory loss, tremors, dizziness, and confusion when consumed daily. Dr. Patricia Nguyen reviewed the findings. Castillo said, "She confirmed that the symptoms you experienced, the fog, the memory lapses, the tremor in your hands, are entirely consistent with chronic low-dose benzodiazepine exposure through oral ingestion. In simple terms, your daughter was drugging you slowly enough that it looked like aging." The second document was the accelerant analysis from the Fire Investigation Unit. Samples taken from the bakery floor, the prep table, and the shelving confirmed the presence of commercial lighter fluid. The burn pattern indicated a deliberate pour originating at the center island and extending in two directions, one toward the front entrance and one toward the stairwell leading to the upstairs apartment. The pour toward the stairwell was significant. It meant the fire was designed to trap anyone sleeping above the bakery. Castillo let that sit for a moment before continuing. The third document was the financial audit. Henry Zhao had given the forensic accounting team full access to the Rhodes and Son corporate records at my request. What they found took 11 pages to summarize. Over a 5-month period, Meredith had used her authorized access to the company accounts to initiate 17 wire transfers totaling $412,000. The money moved through 3 intermediary accounts before landing in an offshore holding registered under the name of a shell company in the Cayman Islands. The shell company was registered by Rachel Voss. Additionally, Meredith had contacted Pinnacle Food Group using forged authorization letters bearing my signature. She had negotiated a preliminary acquisition of the entire Rhodes and Son chain for $120 million. The deal was structured so that 60% of the payment would go to a trust she had created without my knowledge. Had the sale gone through, Meredith would have walked away with $72 million while I received the remaining $48 million, believing it was the full amount. "She was not just trying to kill you for the insurance," Castillo said. "She was dismantling your entire empire piece by piece while you were too drugged to notice." The fourth document was the one that changed everything. It was the reopened case file on Dominic Russo. The district attorney's office had ordered a new blood analysis using the original samples stored at the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. The results showed that Dominic's blood alcohol content at the time of the crash was .02, well below the legal limit. The original report filed by the arresting officers stated .19, nearly 10 times higher. The discrepancy was traced to Rachel Voss, who had accessed the lab results through her position at the defense firm and replaced the original values before they were entered into evidence. Further analysis of the blood samples revealed traces of the same benzodiazepine found in my sourdough starter. Dominic had not been drunk. He had been drugged. The accident that paralyzed Owen and sent Dominic to prison for 8 years was manufactured by Meredith. Castillo closed the envelope. "The district attorney is filing a motion to vacate Dominic Russo's conviction. His lawyer has been notified. If the motion is granted, and I have every reason to believe it will be, Dominic could be released within 60 days. I sat at that kitchen table for a long time after Castillo left. The documents were spread out in front of me. Toxicology reports, fire analysis, bank records, forged signatures, offshore accounts, falsified blood work, the complete architecture of my daughter's betrayal, laid out in black ink on white paper. I thought about the morning she came home. The blueberry muffins, the clean kitchen, the way she sang Eleanor's lullaby to Owen at night, the way she said, "Dad, let me help you with the business." Every moment of warmth had been calculated. Every act of kindness had been a tool. She had rebuilt herself into the daughter I wanted, so that she could take apart the life I had built, and she had used my own love as the mechanism. Owen came out of his room around noon. He was carrying a library book about cryptography, a subject he had become fascinated with since the police took his cipher notebook. He sat down across from me and looked at the documents on the table. "Is it about Dominic?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "He is going to be released. He was innocent, Owen. Your mother drugged him the same way she drugged me. Owen was quiet for a long time. He ran his finger along the edge of the library book. I know, he said softly. I always knew something was wrong about that night. Dominic did not drink. He used to tell me that his father was an alcoholic, and he promised himself he would never touch it. When they said he was drunk, I did not believe it. But I was 10. Nobody listens to a 10-year-old. I am listening now, I said. Owen looked up at me. Dominic was not a perfect person, Grandpa. He lost money, gambling. He made bad decisions, but he loved me. He used to read to me every night, the same way you read to me now, and he did not deserve what happened to him. I reached across the table and put my hand over his. When he gets out, I said, we will make sure he knows the truth. All of it. Owen nodded. He opened his cryptography book and began reading. I gathered the documents and placed them back in the envelope. Outside the window, the Rocky Mountains stood under a clear August sky. The same mountains Eleanor and I had watched from our kitchen window for 30 years. The evidence was complete. The truth was on paper, and somewhere in a state prison 2 hours south of Denver, a man named Dominic Russo was about to learn that the last 2 years of his life had been stolen by the same woman who stole 5 months of mine. The trial began on the first Monday of October in the Denver District Courthouse on Colfax Avenue. The building was old and heavy, built from gray stone that looked like it had been standing there since before the city knew what it wanted to become. I had driven past it 1,000 times on my way to the bakery, and never once imagined I would walk through its doors to testify against my own daughter. Judge Catherine Walsh presided. She was a tall woman in her early 60s with silver hair and reading glasses that she wore on a chain around her neck. She had a reputation for running a tight courtroom. No theatrics. No grandstanding. No wasted time. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney Marcus Webb, a young man with sharp eyes and a quiet voice that somehow carried more weight than shouting ever could. Meredith's defense attorney was a private lawyer named Leonard Pace, paid for with money from the offshore accounts that had been frozen but not yet seized. The courtroom was full. Local news cameras lined the back wall. Reporters filled the gallery. Henry Zhao sat in the second row behind me, wearing a suit I had never seen him wear. Gloria Huerta was there too, 3 rows back, clutching her purse with both hands. Owen sat beside me at the front, his back straight, his hands folded in his lap. Meredith was brought in through a side door in an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. She had lost weight. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She did not look at me. She did not look at Owen. She looked straight ahead at the judge's bench, like she was solving a problem in her mind. The charges were read. Attempted murder in the first degree. Arson in the first degree. Insurance fraud. Wire fraud. Conspiracy to commit bodily harm. Falsification of medical records in connection with the Dominic Russo case. 6 counts total. Meredith pleaded not guilty to all of them. Marcus Webb opened with a timeline. He projected a chart on the courtroom screen that began with Meredith's phone call in March and ended with her arrest in the hospital in August. 5 months compressed into a single visual. Every drug dose, every wire transfer, every recorded conversation, every forged document mapped onto a calendar that made the jury lean forward in their seats. The first witness was Dr. Patricia Nguyen. She explained the toxicology findings in plain language. She told the jury that alprazolam, administered daily in small doses through food, would produce symptoms indistinguishable from natural cognitive decline in a 70-year-old man. She said the word indistinguishable 3 times. She wanted the jury to understand that this was not a clumsy poisoning. This was designed to look like old age. The second witness was the fire investigator, Captain Luis Delgado. He presented photographs of the burn pattern and the accelerant analysis. He pointed to the pour trail leading from the kitchen to the stairwell and said the words designed to prevent escape. A woman in the jury covered her mouth with her hand. The third witness was the forensic accountant, a man named David Park. He walked the jury through the 17 wire transfers, the shell company in the Cayman Islands, the forged authorization letters, and the $120 million acquisition deal with Pinnacle Food Group. He showed them my signature next to the forged version. They were close. Dangerously close. But the forensic analysis revealed micro differences in pressure and stroke pattern that confirmed the forgery. Henry Zhao testified next. He described the phone call he received from Pinnacle, his confusion, his attempt to warn me. He described Meredith's behavior at the bakery, her charm, her efficiency, the way she made everyone believe she was the devoted daughter returning home to help her aging father. Gloria Huerta took the stand after Henry. Her voice shook when she spoke. She described the morning Meredith dismissed her. She described the phone call she made to me, the warning she tried to give. She said, "I want everyone to know that I told him something was wrong, and he was too sick to hear it." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and the courtroom was silent. Then it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand and sat down. Webb asked me to describe the months of fog, the memory loss, the tremors, the dizziness. He asked me about the morning I skipped breakfast and felt clear for the first time. He asked me about the night I heard Meredith in the kitchen at 3 in the morning. He asked me about the fire. He asked me about the phone call from the hospital. I answered every question. I kept my voice steady. I did not look at Meredith. I could not. Webb asked one final question. "Mr. Rhodes, did your daughter ever give you any indication that she intended to harm you?" I was quiet for a moment. "She baked me blueberry muffins the first morning she was home," I said. "They tasted exactly like my wife's recipe. I thought it meant she had come back to me. I thought it meant she loved me." The courtroom was very still. "I was wrong," I said. "The defense called only 2 witnesses. A psychologist, who argued that Meredith had suffered long-term emotional trauma from her mother's death, and a financial consultant who attempted to explain the wire transfers as legitimate business planning. Neither was convincing. The psychologist could not explain the arson. The financial consultant could not explain the forged signatures. Leonard Pace made his closing argument. He spoke about a broken woman, a desperate mother, a daughter who made terrible choices under impossible pressure. He asked the jury for compassion. Marcus Webb stood up for his closing. He was brief. He pointed to the evidence chart on the screen. He pointed to the sourdough starter. He pointed to the burn pattern. He pointed to the video of Meredith pouring lighter fluid across the bakery floor. And then he said, "This was not desperation. This was a plan. A 5-month plan to murder a 70-year-old man, steal his life's work, and walk away with millions. The evidence does not ask for your compassion. It asks for your verdict." The jury deliberated for 4 hours and 37 minutes. They returned at 6:15 in the evening. The foreperson, a middle-aged woman in a gray blazer, stood and read the verdicts. Guilty on count 1, attempted murder in the first degree. Guilty on count 2, arson in the first degree. Guilty on count 3. Guilty on count 4. Guilty on count 5. Guilty on count 6. 6 counts. 6 guilty verdicts. Meredith stood motionless. She did not flinch. She did not cry. She stared at the foreperson as if she were listening to someone read a weather report about a city she had never visited. Owen reached over and took my hand. His grip was firm. I looked down at him. His eyes were dry, but his jaw was tight. The way a boy looks when he is holding everything inside. Because he knows that if he lets even one piece out, the rest will follow. "It is done, Grandpa," he said. I squeezed his hand. The courtroom erupted in noise around us. Cameras flashed. Reporters stood. Lawyers gathered their files. But in that small space between our 2 chairs, it was quiet. It was done. The sentencing hearing was held 3 weeks after the verdict, on the last Friday of October. The leaves along Colfax Avenue had turned gold and red, and the morning air carried the first bite of Colorado winter. I wore the same dark suit I had worn to Eleanor's funeral 8 years earlier. Owen wore a white button-down shirt slightly too large for him and black shoes Henry Zhao had bought the day before. We walked into the courthouse together, and this time I was not afraid. Judge Catherine Walsh entered at 9:15. Meredith was brought in through the side door. The orange jumpsuit hung loose on her shoulders. Her eyes moved across the room and stopped on Owen for the first time since the trial began. She looked at him for a long moment. He looked back. Neither of them blinked. Before I deliver the sentence, Judge Walsh said, "I will hear impact statements." I walked to the podium with a single sheet of paper I had written the night before at the kitchen table while Owen slept in the next room. Your Honor, my name is Franklin Rhodes. I am 70 years old. I have been a baker for most of my life. I raised one daughter. Her name is Meredith. I loved her from the moment she was born, and I love her now, even after everything she has done. That is not a statement of forgiveness. It is a statement of fact. Love does not disappear because the person you love becomes someone you do not recognize. It just changes shape. It becomes something heavier, something you carry instead of something you share. The courtroom was silent. For 5 months, my daughter put drugs in the bread I ate every morning. She watched me lose my memory. She watched me lose my balance. She hired a doctor to make sure no one found out. She stole over $400,000 from accounts I spent a lifetime building. She forged my name on documents that would have sold my bakeries for a fraction of their value. And when the poison was not working fast enough, she set fire to the building I grew up in while I was sleeping on the second floor. I looked at Meredith. She was staring at the table. But the thing that hurts most is not what she did to me. It is what she did to Owen. She drugged his father and put him in a car knowing what would happen. She used his injuries as a disguise. She brought him into my home and used his disability as a prop. And that 12-year-old boy had the courage to sit in a wheelchair for 5 months pretending he could not move so that he could gather enough evidence to save my life. Owen did not deserve any of this, and I will spend whatever time I have left making sure he never has to be that brave again. I returned to my seat. Owen put his hand on my arm. Then Owen walked to the podium. He stood on the small step behind it to reach the microphone. He did not bring a written statement. My name is Owen Rhodes. I am 12 years old. My mother told me my father was a drunk who crashed a car and ruined my life. I believed her for 2 years. When we moved to Denver, I found out she was poisoning my grandfather. I was scared. I thought if I told someone she would run and no one would catch her. So I decided to be invisible. I decided to watch and write and record until I had so much proof that no one could look away. He paused and looked at Meredith. She would not meet his eyes. I do not hate my mother, but I do not know her. The person who did these things is not someone I recognize. I hope she gets help, but I cannot be her son anymore. I am my grandfather's grandson. That is enough for me. Gloria Huerta was crying in the third row. Henry Zhao had his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles in his neck. Even Marcus Webb looked down at the table and blinked several times. Judge Walsh removed her glasses and addressed Meredith directly. Miss Rhodes, in my 31 years on the bench, I have seen crimes driven by desperation, by addiction, by impulse. Your crimes were driven by calculation. You designed a plan to murder your father slowly, to steal his wealth systematically, and to use your own disabled child as camouflage. The sophistication of your scheme is matched only by its cruelty. She opened the sentencing folder. On count 1, attempted murder in the first degree, I sentence you to 32 years. On count 2, arson in the first degree, 15 years to run concurrently. On counts 3 through 6, additional terms totaling 8 years to run consecutively. The total effective sentence is 40 years, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Meredith closed her eyes. It was the first visible emotion she had shown since the trial began. Additionally, Dr. Nathan Cross has accepted a plea agreement of 12 years for conspiracy to commit murder and medical fraud. Rachel Voss has accepted a plea agreement of 6 years for evidence tampering and conspiracy. The gavel came down. Officers led Meredith toward the side door. She stopped and turned. She looked at Owen. Her lips moved with no sound. I could read what she said. "I am sorry." Owen watched her disappear through the door. Then he turned to me. "Can we go home now, Grandpa?" We walked out into the October sun. The air was cold and clean. The mountains stood sharp against a blue sky with the first dusting of early snow. Owen walked beside me, hands in his coat pockets, his breath making small clouds. We did not talk about the sentence. We did not talk about Meredith. We walked 3 blocks in silence, until Owen stopped in front of an empty storefront with a for lease sign in the window. He looked at it for a long moment. "This would be a good spot for a bakery," he said. I looked at the storefront. Small. Maybe half the size of the original flagship. Dusty windows. Torn awning, but it faced east toward the mountains. And the morning sun would pour through those windows like honey. "Yes, it would," I said. The new sign went up on a Saturday morning in October, exactly 1 year after the sentencing. Owen designed it himself. He spent 3 weeks sketching versions on graph paper at the kitchen table, erasing and redrawing until every letter was right. Dark green letters on a cream background, the same color scheme my father had used in 1968. But the name was different. Rhodes and Grandson. The signmaker mounted it above the front door at 8 in the morning. Owen stood on the sidewalk with his arms crossed, studying it the way an architect studies a finished building. He tilted his head left, then right, then nodded once. "It is straight," he said. "It is perfect," I said. The bakery was smaller than the original. 1 open kitchen, a counter with 8 stools, 4 tables by the window, and a glass display case that held exactly 12 items. Owen had insisted on 12, 1 for each year of his life. We opened with sourdough, rye, cinnamon rolls, blueberry muffins, banana bread, wheat loaves, olive focaccia, honey oat, pumpernickel, sesame seed rolls, chocolate croissants, and Eleanor's buttermilk biscuits. Owen had found the biscuit recipe in a box of Eleanor's things I had kept in the closet for 8 years and never opened. Henry Zhao was the first customer. He ordered a sourdough loaf and a black coffee and sat at the counter for 2 hours, smiling, watching the line grow. Gloria Huerta came at 10 with sunflowers. She put them in a jar by the register and hugged Owen so tight he had to ask her to let go. Dr. Patricia Nguyen stopped by at lunch and told me my color looked good. My hands were steady, and I looked 10 years younger than the man she had examined 13 months ago. She was right. The fog had not returned. Not once. I woke every morning at 4:30 and walked downstairs and made bread. Real bread. Clean bread. Bread that was nothing more than flour, water, salt, and thyme. Owen worked beside me every morning before school. He was 13 now, taller by 2 inches. His teachers said he was quiet but exceptional. His math scores were in the top 1% of the state. He had joined the robotics club and built a small device that measured flour weight to the 100th of a gram. He kept it on the prep table next to the sourdough starter. After the trial, a professor at the University of Colorado named Dr. Alan Whitfield read about Owen's cipher in the newspaper. He invited Owen to sit in on his introductory cryptography course. The professor told me that Owen's cipher used a polyalphabetic substitution method with a rotating key more sophisticated than anything he had seen from an undergraduate. Dominic Russo was released from prison in December. His conviction was vacated. The state issued a formal apology. I drove Owen to meet him at a coffee shop in Aurora on a cold Sunday afternoon. They sat across from each other without speaking for a long time. Then Dominic reached across the table and put his hand on Owen's head, the way a father does when he does not have the words. "I missed you," Dominic said. "I missed you too," Owen said. Dominic visited every other weekend after that. They would walk to the park, or sit in the bakery after closing and talk. I did not ask what they talked about. That was between them. What mattered was that Owen had his father back. Imperfect and scarred, but real. In March, I created the Rhodes Foundation. Henry Zhao helped me set it up. We funded it with proceeds from the sale of 11 of the original 18 bakery locations, $62 million. The mission was simple: protect children who cannot protect themselves, fund legal aid for kids trapped in abusive homes, pay for therapy, education, housing, and medical care for minors who have been used or harmed by the people who were supposed to love them. Owen sat on the advisory board. He was the youngest member by 40 years. At the first meeting, when board members introduced themselves with titles and credentials, Owen said, "My name is Owen Rhodes. I am 13. I built a cipher to survive my mother and recorded a crime to save my grandfather. I think that qualifies me to be here." Nobody disagreed. On the anniversary morning, after the sign went up and the first customers left, I sat at the counter with a cup of coffee. Owen was in the kitchen cleaning the mixer. Through the front window, I could see the mountains with early snow dusting the peaks white against a sky so blue it looked painted. Owen came out and sat next to me. He had chocolate on his chin from testing the croissant batter. "Grandpa," he said, "do you think she ever thinks about us?" I knew who he meant. "I think she does," I said. "But I do not think she thinks about us the way we think about her." He considered that. "That is probably true," he said. He picked up a cinnamon roll and broke it in half. He gave me the larger piece. We ate in silence, watching the morning light fill the bakery. "Grandpa," he said. "Yes. Thank you for letting me come home." I looked at him. 13 years old. Flour on his hands. Chocolate on his chin. A mind that could build ciphers and robots and sourdough starters. A heart that had survived things no child should ever have to survive. "You were always home," I said. "You just had to find your way here." The brass clock from 1975 hung on the wall behind the register. They had pulled it from the wreckage of the old bakery, dented and blackened but still keeping time. It ticked steadily in the quiet morning, counting the seconds of a life that was finally our own. If you are listening to this story and you know a child who is suffering in silence, please do not look away. Sometimes the bravest people in the room are the smallest ones. And sometimes the only thing standing between a child and the worst day of their life is one adult who pays attention. My name is Franklin Rhodes. This is our story. And that clock is still ticking.